All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Creating an Equitable Online Learning Environment with Universal Design. I am your host, Vanessa Douthard. I am an EdTech specialist here at Cipher Learning. My most recent qualifications include an EDS in Learning Technologies and Design, along with user experience and usability. I've been in the education sphere for my entire adult life, which has been so exciting. And today I'm really excited to join you on this journey through this topic that covers how to create an equitable online learning environment with universal design. So this topic is very special to me because as an edtech specialist, I do get to see firsthand how our client base approaches designing their learning environment in both Neo for education and Matrix for business platforms. So this webinar really is kind of like a tribute to all of my lovely clients who have asked me in the past for advice regarding what they can do to design a better approach to LMS learning. So we're going to start off today with a discussion about what universal design is, why it matters, how to utilize it. Then I'm going to take you through some of my suggested actionable steps that are going to allow you to incorporate universal design inspired decisions on your Cipher Learning platform experience in both the short and the long term. So if at any point you do have any questions, please, I would love to hear them. We do have a Q&A area down somewhere in the Zoom taskbar where you can type your questions. You can also type them in the chat as well. And I will be answering those questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A time. All right, so we are incredibly lucky to have a very amazing mix of people from different backgrounds joining us here in the webinar today. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you have already heard these two words, universal design, put together in some sort of fashion during your education or during your research. The concept of universal design, it actually has its roots in certain design fields like architecture, commercial products, also the technology field like IT and design. But in the past few years, we've also seen it a lot in the education sphere, which is where a lot of you might recognize it from. And it simply refers to the creation of products and spaces that can be used by the widest range of people as possible from the start to support easy access. So in this case today, we're of course referring to the digital space of a Cipher Learning product. And the creation of your products or your content within them. I see some chats. Yay, hello everybody. One thought that we might be having when we see this definition is its connection to accessibility. So if you're in the education sphere, if you're a teacher, if you're a trainer, instructional designer, you have likely heard the term accessibility. It has access right in there. We also see access here in this definition as well. You would be right to think of that connection because as we can see in this very simple visualization, universal design has actually evolved from accessible design. So the main difference between these two is very simple. Accessible design addresses the needs of specifically people with disabilities, while universal design addresses the needs of all people, whether or not they have a disability. So we're adding on to that scope of people that we're trying to address. So another question that might come to mind could be, why does universal design matter to people who don't have disabilities? Universal design is about providing access, but, and we might be thinking this, and it's okay if you are, able-bodied people, they already have access, right? Why should we focus on them? You might be thinking that, and that's perfectly fine. The reason that it matters is because of the dimensions of diversity that exist all over the world. So in every corner of every country, we have diversity. It exists, it's there. Some of the dimensions of diversity that we're going to touch on today. So this is not an exhaustive list of the dimensions of diversity, but we do include people with degrees of disability and impairment over towards the front. These can be physical, so like not having any hands to type on a keyboard, or they can be cognitive, such as dyslexia, or perception-based, like deafness or blindness. But what you'll also see on this list right next to that is age. So age is a factor of diversity that we consider when we make design decisions based on universal design. Being a child is not a disability, neither is being elderly, but we all know that cognitively, children of a certain age will only be able to read or understand a certain amount of words, a certain level of words at one time, while an elderly person may cognitively be very good, very spry, very younger than their age. They may also be required to regularly take a medication that makes them sleepy all the time or makes them forget things. Because again, remember, universal design is not just for people with disabilities. It's also for those other people who just seem to have a hard time doing certain things at certain times. Computer expertise is another example of the type of diversity that we take into account with universal design. Someone who has no experience whatsoever with computers is going to need very, very different things from someone who has spent years in an education system that uses technology on a daily basis, who experiences many different types of LMSs and is very agile in the way that they approach the newness of LMS systems. Cultural and language differences are also a great example of what we get to account for when utilizing universal design. Social issues is a dimension of diversity that I find can sometimes be overlooked. Someone from a different socioeconomic status, by definition, has different access to certain things or as somebody who is from another status. So this can greatly impact the decisions we find ourselves making as designers of a learning community, whether on Neo or Matrix, whether your customers are on our platforms as members of the general public or their employees in your specific organization. There are always, always, always considerations to be made. So as we move through this webinar, we're going to focus specifically on suggestions regarding how we can meet the needs that arise from some of these dimensions using Cypher products as a basis. However, I think it's important to kind of preface that with some context so that we can truly, truly understand where those suggestions are coming from. Since again, this is not by any chance an exhaustive list of suggestions, because there are many, many applications of universal design. Here, this beautiful diagram shows you the ones that I chose, the applications that I chose to focus on for this webinar. As I mentioned towards the beginning of the webinar, universal design has roots in a lot of different fields. So technology was one, and then I also mentioned that it has been spreading over the years into the field of education. So if you're a teacher or if you're a trainer, instructional designer, or such, you'll likely heard of universal design for learning. If you haven't, that's okay. But it is an offshoot of universal design that challenges those specific titles to make certain decisions to inform the learning and teaching experience. From the technology field, we have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which if you're a web developer, if you're an e-learning developer, or a UX UI designer or such, you're probably likely to have heard about these. If not, again, that's fine. These guidelines are also an offshoot of universal design. So we can, based on this diagram, think of universal design as kind of this umbrella term with a whole bunch of different applications inside of it. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but they are the ones that I found I could give a more solid suggestion based on what I've seen happening or not happening across the client base, at least in the US. And just because something is happening or not happening doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's just, for me, an invitation to learn some things that we could maybe put into use. So that brings us to a specific question. If after this webinar, we decide to incorporate universal design into our regular practice to create more accessible environments for our learners, how do we do that? There are a couple of ways to think about that how. First, it starts off with universal design principles. So universal design as a concept does have some general principles that should be followed when you start utilizing universal design. And I want you to think of these in terms of my design choices they should do something. They should be useful and marketable to people with different abilities. They should communicate essential information effectively to all types of users, and they should integrate a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. So this is a very high level representation of what universal design choices should do. To narrow that down a little bit more, we can actually look at these 3 guidelines. So these are also standardized guidelines from Universal Design Concept. And adopting these can help you meet those more general principles. The way that we can think about these is to achieve the principles, I can ... I can assure elements and resources are accessible to many diverse populations as possible. I can provide multiple ways for participants to learn and to demonstrate what they have learned, and I can provide multiple ways to engage. So still, even taking into account these principles and these guidelines, we still have that lingering question, how? Because as nice as these principles and guidelines are, there's still no actionable steps of what we can actually do to get that up and running on our platforms for our learners. So this is the part of the webinar where we kind of get to the juicy part of the topic. So the concrete suggestions that you can use to implement universal design choices in your personal or your organizational platform environment. And the way that I've laid out these specific tips is based on the dimensions of diversity that we saw a little bit earlier. So specifically the perception-based diversity, cognitive-based diversity, and language and cultural diversity. So we'll be going through each of these one by one and seeing what exactly we can do on the platform to start that process of becoming more accessible to all types of learners. So perception-based diversity relates to the way that people use their senses. So in this context for this webinar, we're going to focus on seeing and hearing, because when utilizing digital learning, seeing and hearing is a little bit more important than something like being able to sense touch or being able to smell something. So seeing and hearing is what we're going to focus on. The tips here are going to focus on considering aids and assistive technology, both on and off the platform, particularly in the form of these following list items. So visual adjustments, screen readers, closed captioning, and utilizing the immersive reader, which is my favorite thing ever. I really love the immersive reader. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the platform and I'm going to show you what we can do. So can I get a quick thumbs up if we can see the platform? Perfect. Thank you, Tony. Awesome. So we're here in the platform. I'm going to move the Zoom cameras over a little bit. And when it comes to perception diversity, the first thing that we're going to talk about is visual adjustments. So when we're talking about visual adjustments, a lot of the times we're considering color blindness. So color blindness is there are different types of color blindness, and it's the inability to see colors the way a non-colorblind person would normally see them. So some colors look like other colors, some colors all look the same. And so on a digital environment, that becomes very important because, as you can see, just looking at this, there are a lot of colors, a lot of things going on. And with those colors blending and not necessarily looking the way we intended them to, we can inadvertently create problems for people who suffer with this impairment. So one of the things that we have on the platform is actually some accessibility options and some accessibility themes. So from the dashboard, this is the page that you'll hit once you log in. From the admin side, what you can do is go over to admin, and through all of these beautiful selections, we have the portal. In the portal, almost right away, we're going to see accessibility over here. And there are a couple of options in here. The first one is accessibility for the carousel. This option is using a high contrast theme. So when we come into the admin selection and we come into the portal, we're doing this as a site-wide configuration. So this isn't just how it's going to look for us, it's how it's going to look for everybody. So coming back to that accessibility, using a high contrast theme, what will happen when we click this is you'll see the colors change. So this menu has changed over to black with some white text and icons, which increases that contrast so that it's easier to see. Also, not just for colorblind people, but just for people in general, it's easy to see. We also have some color changes up here. This red really stands out against the blue. The white really stands out against the blue as well. But again, these are more site-wide configurations, and we might not want this type of configuration site-wide for everybody all across the board if we don't want to, especially if we come from organizations that have specific branding that needs to be followed. So we'll go ahead and uncheck this, but it is an option in case it's something you wanted. And what we'll focus on next is actually the themes area. So we're in the same section, admin portal, and going to themes. What we'll be able to see is a bunch of different built-in themes. Right at the top, we have this accessibility enablement. This will allow users to select separate accessibility theme via their profile settings. So it's almost like setting this high contrast theme, but we're allowing users to, oops, wrong one. Sorry. We're allowing users to pick if they want to use the accessibility theme for their own personal instance or not. So as you can see, we have some custom themes that we've done here. For the standard built-in themes, we don't see a lot of use with a lot of these simply because there are a lot of instances where people need to use organizational branding. But we do have one, it's called Blue 3, and it does have accessible options here. And so when you click that, this one? No, this one, sorry. Blue 3. So when you click that, you'll be able to come into the options. You'll be able to see what's going to happen accessibility wise based on underlining the links and dark grays for contrast. So this can be a good theme to use in case you don't have those branding constraints, and you can use any type of theme that you want. But we can also come to adding a custom theme. As I mentioned, we have some here. When you go to add a custom theme, first of all, you can name the theme, but you have access to change the colors to anything that you need it to be. And we do have some accessibility features down here. So underlining the links, which can be very helpful, as well as dark grays for contrast, which can also be very helpful to make those whites pop out so they're easier to see. Also, at the bottom, interestingly, we have useful links. So if you're creating your own themes, there are some links down here. This accessibility color contrast checker is actually really useful. If you're coming from an organization that has branding, you might already have those colors and such checked for accessibility. But if you're working on your own, if you are using Neo or Matrix just for your own personal adventures, and you don't have necessarily all of that help with creating the branding colors, these can definitely be very, very helpful in choosing colors that are not going to be too difficult for others who do have these impairments to see. So I just want to go back really quickly to this allow users to select separate accessibility themes from their profile settings. What this communicates is when we go to our profile, if we have a theme that has accessibility related to it, we'll be able to go to our profile, or I think it doesn't even have to have accessibility. We'll be able to go to our profile settings, and then towards the top, yes, here, we'll be able to click this to use an accessible theme for our own personal use on the platform without it transferring over to anybody else. This is just for our view. So really, really cool, really, really interesting. I am going to turn this off because I like our red, white, and blue. But going back to the dashboard, we'll start back from here. Screen readers are actually next on our list. So we've covered visual adjustments, and screen readers are next. So screen readers are really cool. They're an assistive technology that's used by blind people or people who have very limited vision. And often screen readers will, this isn't the only thing they do, but often people will use screen readers to convert the plain text that's on a page to speech. So the user can listen to it. The hard-coded parts of the products that we have offered in Psych for Learning are tested using some of the most popular screen reader software being used today. So a screen reader is not something that you would enable on the platform. It's something that the user who needs it would have externally. So it's not something we can enable here. But screen reading experience can be made a little bit easier using specific things on the platform and specific formats on the platform. So in order to do that, we're going to go into a course. So I made a course and I've called it Universal Design. And I have a webinar sandbox module in here. So I have already some things set up. We're going to see a lot of these a little bit later, but we have useful tips for screen readers. Oftentimes, when I'm doing a training or when I'm helping with consultative services as an EdTech specialist, I'll come into somebody's platform and I'll see a page that looks similar to this. So we have some text. If you can't read what this says, that's okay. It just means you don't speak Latin. But we have some text, and then we have a picture, and then maybe a couple of links, and then in the resources, almost all the time there are embedded PDFs. Everybody loves the embedded PDFs. I love the embedded PDFs too, they're great. But there are a couple of things here that's going on with this page that can actually interfere with the way a screen reader works. So the first thing is the absence of headers. Headers are very, very important for screen readers because headers are the way that a screen reader creates context for the person who's listening. So remember, a screen reader is used for people who have vision diversity. So they won't be able to see the headers. They need to hear that it's there. So we're going to go ahead and edit this page. And I want to show you the correct way to make a header and the incorrect way to make a header. And I'll use this first one. So the incorrect way to make a header is to type a word and then bold it and then increase the size. It looks like a header, but it actually doesn't do anything semantically within the code that the screen reader can read or to latch onto. So what we're going to do instead is come to this option here, paragraph, and we have all of these header options, all of these div options, code options, and these are the ones that we're going to use, because when we use header 1, the screen reader technology is going to be able to communicate to the person using it that, hey, this is a new section. This is a new header 1 section, and that gives context to what that information is in the grand scheme of the content that you have on the page. Another thing that kind of gets in the way of screen readers is with these images. So having images, even if somebody who is using your platform is blind, is not a bad idea. Images are great. But one thing that you can do in order to assist people who cannot see the images is to add some alt text. And that's really easy to do. When you have your pictures in here, you'll click on the image, and then you'll come over to image options. And we have this image description here. So this is what the screen reader is actually going to read to the person who's using the screen reader. So if you have a picture of kids playing on a playground, you'd say kids playing on a playground. So even though that person who has this specific perception diversity issue can't see the kids playing on the playground, they'll be able to hear that description of the image through their screen reader technology. So that's something I always recommend anytime you have images, to do the image description, because it's very, very helpful. All right, and then the last thing we're going to touch on for this area is the alternatives to PDFs. So I don't want to scare anybody. Actually, before that, I forgot this link. Let's get to that in a moment. I don't want to scare anybody when I say alternatives to PDFs, just because a lot of people do really, really love these embedded PDFs. The only issue with these embedded PDFs is that when it's embedded, a screen reader can't read anything that's on the PDF. So if you have really important information here, it's good for somebody who has, is site enabled to see, because they can see it right away when they open up the module. But a screen reader will actually get to this embedded element, and it knows it's an embedded element, but it won't be able to read anything on the PDF that's actually embedded inside there. So having these embedded elements, you don't have to get rid of them, because they are cool and they are useful. But what we can do is, coming back into this content section, we can create an alternative list of resources. So here we have follow this link to learn more about UD. That can be part of our list. So we can have something at the bottom that says PDF. Can't spell, yes. PDF resources. And of course, the screen reader is going to be able to read this. So somebody who's not being able to see will hear PDF resources. And then underneath, we can make a list of all the PDF resources that we've embedded down below. So I'll do a numbered list, and I'll say dummy PDF, because that's the PDF that we had embedded below. And I'll link that to, oh, actually, I want to upload it, so we can have it as a downloadable file. I'm going to go into here. Here we go. Dummy PDF. Let's make sure there are no extra things that we can add. Okay, title is something that we would have to add. So the title of the PDF, because the screen reader will be able to read that and add the context in there. And then if we wanted to have another resource, such as this one, it's always a bad idea. I'm sorry if this is something that you do, but it's always kind of a bad idea to have these types of links just thrown into your content, because remember what a screen reader does. It reads everything in the content. So once the person gets to this link, the screen reader is going to go through a minute-long HTTPS : and it just takes a long time. It's really hard to kind of visualize what that is. So we take this link, and some of us will just click here. But even that it's getting a lot closer, but even that is a little bit dangerous because this click here doesn't give any context about what it is, right? If we have a ton, click here inside of different areas in our platform, it's hard to remember which ones we've already clicked. So using the actual titles of the PDFs is always a great idea. So for this one, it's an online resource. So what I'll do is I will link it here and then I'll add the title. So universal design. Perfect. I'll get rid of this one. So in this way, we still have that flexibility to use the embedded PDFs that everybody loves, but we also give leeway to the people who can't necessarily use those embedded PDFs. We have these options here that they can utilize instead. Cool. Okay, so let me just reorient myself. So with the screen readers, we cover the perception diversity, so diversity related to sight. However, another group that we can take into account when it comes to perception diversity is deaf. So people who are deaf, people who are hard of hearing, as well as those who might simply just feel a lot more comfortable listening rather than reading words, because again, UD is not just about disabilities. So that brings us to one of the features that we offer, which is closed captioning on videos and also the immersive reader. So I'm saving the best for last, immersive reader. With the closed captioning, we're going to come over to this design trends video. So this design trends video is an uploaded file. So I took this file, this video file from my computer and I uploaded it into the platform. And when we do that, we have the option to come down to edit display properties. And we can add closed captioning files, VTT files from here. So those VTT files can be uploaded in different languages, so it doesn't just have to be English. And I didn't actually have the opportunity to create a VTT file for you today, but I do have an example of the way that it works. So over here in this VTT file section, I have a video. This is a web resource. This is a YouTube video. And YouTube videos, a lot of them have closed captioning on them. And the way that it works is if you play a video, you won't be able to hear it. But we have this CC down here, and this CC is closed captioning. So when you click it, the person will be able to see the file that you uploaded on the video in this way. So they'll be able to read what's happening when it's happening. And it's really, really cool. So there are a lot of different resources all around the web of how to create VTT files in an efficient way. Sometimes they can be a little bit time consuming, but there are a lot of resources that will help you to create those if it's something that you're interested in. All right, so moving right along, we're going to talk about the immersive reader. So coming out, I'm just going to re-click on this module. Coming out of this, we're going to look at the immersive reader. So it's a really cool feature because as you'll see in a second, users are going to be able to access text to speech with the click of a button. So this is stepping away from video a little bit, and it's just looking at the content of the page. So if we go back into the module and we go to this immersive reader one, we're going to see that we have some text here. I just copied and pasted this off of Wikipedia. Sorry, Wikipedia. But we have an immersive reader option enabled here. And before I get into how it works, I actually want to show you how to enable it. So what we will do, if you don't already have it enabled, is you need to go to the main menu, admin, App Center. So the immersive reader is located in the App Center. I'm going to search for it just to make things faster. And then you'll install it from here. And then once it's installed from the App Center, you'll be able to use it in your different courses. So if we go back to our course, Universal Design, and then instead of the main menu, if we go to the course menu, admin, and then we click more, we'll be able to see enable immersive reader here. So once we do that, when we go into the modules and we have a content section, it will come up automatically wherever it needs to. But we have this section here. And right now, we just have content on a page, which is easy for some of us to read, but not for all of us. And with the immersive reader, we'll click the button, and this is what will happen for a user. So they'll see the immersive reader open up in a new box. And there's this play option here. And you won't be able to hear this, but when we hit play, it's going to say the words as it hits them. I can hear them. It sounds really nice. But in case it doesn't sound really nice, learners will also be able to control the voice speed. They'll be able to control the voice selection. They'll also be able to come in here and do text preferences. So if they want to increase the text size, decrease the text size, increase the spacing, change the font, formatting, there's so many options that can make them more comfortable using the immersive reader. There are grammar options where they can select certain parts of speech, syllables. I know a lot of this is getting into some really granular types of offerings, but for some people, this stuff really is necessary. Reading preferences, we also have line focusing. So if we just want to focus on a specific line at once, we can do that. A few lines at a time, we can also do that. There's a picture dictionary and it translates. So this is really, really cool. I'll just pick Albanian, but when we do that by document, it will translate into whatever language you need it to be in, which we'll touch on again a little bit later. But this is so super cool to me. And I have to close menu, exit out. So that's definitely something I recommend implementing onto your content, just because it's very, very useful for people of all types of diversity. All right, so let's go back to our okay, so can everybody see the PowerPoint again? Just checking, because for some reason I'm not getting that feedback. Perfect, great. Okay, so coming back to our discussion. So far, we've gone over some aids and some tips to assist with the more perceptive diversity, the perception diversity. So the next step that we're going to hit on is actually the cognitive diversity. And there's a little bit less to show on the platform for this one than there is the other one, but it's some really exciting stuff, at least for me. So when we talk about cognitive-based diversity, this relates to a person's mental functioning. So memory loss, attention deficit disorder or ADD, or simply just being overly tired or really stressed out or super overwhelmed by work or kids or just life in general. These are some examples of some cognitive diversity issues or impairments. So some honorable mentions. I'm not necessarily going to take you through these in the platform because I think they are more or less a little bit self-explanatory, but some honorable mentions that can help cater to learners with cognitive needs are prioritizing coherence. So you're going to hear this word from me a lot today, coherence. It's like my new favorite word. Organization, simplicity. That's what I'm referring to when I say coherence. Less is truly more when it comes to text and other elements in a learning space. And we're going to talk about why in a second, but having consistent organization throughout all of your content, clear, easy to follow layouts, uncluttered pages, all of those things can really, really go a long way in helping people, mainly because it considers cognitive load. So cognitive load theory is a very special theory. It's one of my favorite theories of all times, especially when it comes to considering cognitive diversity. Cognitive load is the amount of information that working memory can hold at one time. So we have, based on the theory, we have two different types of memory. There's working memory and there's long-term memory. You may have also heard working memory as short-term memory. They're the same thing. But the processing that happens between the two is first encoding, so from the working memory to the long-term memory, and then retrieval, the other way around. During encoding, we're converting the data that's incoming and pushing it to the long-term memory. So in this way, we can kind of think of cognitive load in the working memory as a cup, because there's only so much data that can be held at once in the working memory. And so when the working memory starts to get full, or when we have cognitive effects that are preventing it from becoming full, then that's when we start to encounter those coding problems. So what this means for us is there are some tips. You're going to notice that the first tip under cognitive load is similar to the first one on the page under coherence. Again, less is truly more, and I only put this in kind of in a different way twice because it is so crucial. It's so very important. A very critical design decision that has to be made when putting out content for others is what is necessary, not what is nice to have, although nice to haves are nice to have. What is necessary and what is not. So as providers of information, as teachers, as trainers, as instructors, we want to give our learners the best. I truly understand that. We want to provide them with all of the information they need, with everything that they need in order to learn the content that we're trying to teach them. But that doesn't necessarily mean we provide them with more words. In this case, it might just be the difference between providing more words and more input to providing more opportunities. So keeping instructions, a few sentences at the most. Content pages are organized with alike information, so we don't have the same information here and then here and then here and then on another page. Having messages be delivered in a way where we can kind of compartmentalize certain ideas inside of each little snippet of information that we're giving. So the things that are not necessarily can be moved somewhere else, or they can be deleted entirely I mean, that's definitely not my decision to make, but definitely a consideration to be made. So the next tip is a little bit similar. So this leads me into segmenting, and I'm realizing the time, so I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. Segmenting, so it's an amazing principle. One thing that I have noticed a lot is that when the unnecessary, okay, let me back up a little bit. Segmenting, I've encountered a lot of trainers and instructors who will teach a course primarily using video, which is not a problem in itself, but each video that they utilize is 1 to sometimes 4 hours long for each module in a course sometimes. And that likely means that during that 1 to 4 hour video, learners are being asked to take in many pieces of information, and that they're likely having to work extra hard to cognitively organize all of that information themselves, to connect the pieces, to figure out exactly what's important. And that's a lot of unnecessary effort, and that does impact the cognitive process through fatigue. We get tired. So, and I realize the irony of me doing a 1 hour presentation, but imagine sitting through a 2 hour lecture. Most people will probably be able to do it just fine. I know I can do it just fine. But how much will you really take away from it? So maybe a lot, but imagine going to that same 2 hour lecture and then, or having just worked an 8 hour shift. Right? It's going to be a lot harder. Or having a condition that causes memory loss or difficulty keeping attention on one thing. It's going to be much, much harder to get the same types of information from that one place. So attention is important, because the more attention paid to a specific concept, the more it's processed and the more likely it is to be remembered. So segmenting your video content into smaller chunks. Recently, we have actually released a so one of the things before I even get there is that on our products, on Matrix, on Neo, on Indie, we have unlimited storage. So there's no limit to the amount of videos that you can upload to your platform. And we have also increased the limit to 2 gigabytes. So that is definitely going a little bit in the opposite direction. But you do have that leeway, just in case a 10 to 15-minute video does not work for you. You can definitely increase that a little bit more. But segmenting your video into smaller chunks of alike information is one of the best design decisions that you can make, for sure. Yay, 2 gigabytes. I know, super handy. Awesome. Okay, so helping your learners to externalize information. So this is what I'm going to quickly go through. Externalizing information is when we transform knowledge into external representations to reduce the memory load. So remember, we have that cup, and the cup can only hold a certain amount of data. So we want to take some things out of the cup, but still keep it easily accessible so that we can make space for other things. So there are a few things that we can do on the platform that's going to make it a little bit easier for learners to externalize those things. And some of those things I will show you right now. So I'm going to start over from course. I'll just go to the main course. So actually, I'm going to go to the dashboard. When we log in, we hit this dashboard first and foremost. Some of the information, some of the features that we offer on the right side of the dashboard. And this message is a little bit more towards administrators, because administrators, you get to decide what is seen on this dashboard, right? The configurations that you make here are going to be the configurations for everybody across the site. So here we have calendar, which obviously is great for externalizing date information. So if I don't have to remember when an event is happening, the calendar can do that for me. It frees up a little bit more space. The to-do. So the to-do feature is really, really cool. The to-do feature populates with items that are linked to the due dates that are across the site in the courses. So if a quiz is due, you're going to see quiz due, or take the quiz. If something needs to be finished, you'll see it populate here based on the courses that they're enrolled into. And the way to further utilize this is, you see this plus sign. Well, first of all, the way to get this is coming over to this icon here, right panel, and then choosing it from these available widgets if you don't already have it. Another thing that we can do is over in the policies. So from admin over to, where was it? Admin, oh yeah, over to portal. I think I'm wrong. Admin over to portal. No, policies. Sorry about that. Admin over to policies, learners. And what we can do down towards the bottom is we can actually enable learners to add their own to-do items. So these aren't going to be linked to anything in the platform. They're just created by the learners. So we can, again, externalize all those pieces of information that we need to remember and put them somewhere. Another thing that we can do, coming back to the dashboard, we have announcements that are tied to the news feature. If that's something you're working on, any of the announcements that are important to remember can be externalized here. Any upcoming things can be externalized here in this upcoming widget. We also have blogs and portfolios. So these are really important as well. So with the blogs coming to admin, policies, learners, we can actually enable a personal blog. So this personal blog is going to be available on the learner's profile. So in this blog, you can encourage them to keep track of their learning. When they put a post here, they can use the HTML editor. If they're not super equipped to type, they can do a voice recording up to 30 minutes of the things that they've learned. They can do a video recording. They can add pictures, diagrams, things that they've made into this blog, and it's private, so only they will be able to access it. Alternatively, we also have a portfolio. So in this portfolio, as you can see, I already have one folder, but learners can add folders based on their courses. And inside of those folders, they can add files, pages, tools, a bunch of different things that will help them to externalize that data. And they can also, inside of the profiles, when they submit an assignment, they have the option to save that assignment into their profile. So then they're keeping together all of their learning material, all of their assessment material in one place, so they can go back easily to it and then see what they've learned, where they're at, and potentially where they're going as well. All right, so I am going to go back to our presentation. So as we wrap up, there's we're going to start to notice, and we're okay on time, we're going to start to notice that the remaining tips I have left are going to be intertwined with some of the ones that I previously covered. So language and cultural diversity is our last stop in this webinar, and it's one that's very, very dear to me. I actually started out in the education sphere with a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages. So I was an ESL teacher for a very long time for adults, and I had the absolute privilege of working with people from all over the world, all corners of the planet, and it was very, very cool. As providers of digital learning, through your content, the likelihood that you have learners whose first language is not English, or the target language that you're focusing on in your content on your platform, is very, very high in a lot of cases. And so where I want to end on is basically giving a little call to action to always consider the time and the effort that it takes for someone who's learning a target language to engage linguistically, because it does take a lot of time and it does take a lot of effort. Some of the ways we can account for these learners is including those video closed captionings, which we explored when talking about perception diversity. This can be a great way to help this particular group, because reading can often be a little bit easier than listening in a second language. We can also enable the language selector, which I'll show you in just a moment, and then the video transcripts. Before we get to the language selector, which is a really, really cool thing, last but certainly not least, I do want to touch on this word again, coherence. So keeping it sweet, simple, avoid using a lot of target language specific idioms or expressions, avoid using really overly complicated words unnecessarily, or structures, grammar structures, because the point of teaching and training it's to make learning easy for learners. It's not to make it harder. So just to end up, I will show you how to configure that language option on the platform, and then we'll open up for some questions in the last 5 minutes. So going from the dashboard, if you go to the bottom of the page, you'll see English US. That's the language selector down there. So the way that we can enable that is going to admin, portal, and then you'll see it right here, language. So this is displaying the language selection in the footer. So when someone comes to your portal, they'll be able to choose if they want to see the hard-coded parts of the portal in a different language. So this is not going to touch any of the content you have, right? If somebody changes the portal to Spanish and your content is in English, that content is going to stay in English, but the rest of everything you see that's hard-coded on the platform is going to be in the language that they choose. Also, you can mention that if a learner goes to their profile and they go to settings, down toward the bottom, they can actually pick a language that the platform will open up to. So every time they log in, they won't have to go to this footer down here to choose the language. They can just choose it from here, and it's going to save that setting so that they'll always be able to see the hard-coded parts in the language that they choose. I'm kind of sad it's over. I mean, I'm sure some people are excited, but I'm a little bit sad. So to finish up, I truly, truly hope that some of the information and tips that I shared with you sparked some interest or some ideas that you can use to become an advocate for universal access to learning for all. I truly, truly thank you all for being here and for letting me go a little bit over time. I'm going to switch over to some questions, so I'll stop sharing. And we'll see if we have any questions. I have one in the Q&A. Oh, perfect. Somebody has. All our content is wrapped in SCORM. Can the immersive reader read the content in SCORM packaging? That's a great question. So a SCORM package, when you put it into the platform, it is similarly put in there the same way an embedded PDF would be put. So the screen reader, once it hits that embedded content, is not going to be able to read anything in the SCORM package, but there might be some options within the SCORM authoring tool that can help you get around that. I would definitely look into that. Oh, I can't answer the Q&A. Oh, thank you, Tony. One question in chat. When will Matrix offer closed captioning narratively without having to export the VTT and then upload to Matrix? Other LMS platforms? Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a good question. I would definitely look at the roadmap. So in the Help Center, there could be a roadmap that might offer that. And if it's not there, I would definitely put it in the suggestions area, because that's where the engineers gather and they see what people are needing and what people are requesting. So definitely go to the suggestions area if it's not already a thing. Again, from Tony, hi. To add to that question, what about an MS Word file that's added into the resource? Immersive reader will work. So this question is a little bit different, because now we're talking about, oh no, still the immersive reader. I would check that one. I don't actually know. I would assume, and Tony, if I were you, I would test this. I would assume that because the Microsoft Word file is being uploaded from an external source, or it's being linked from an external source, that the immersive reader wouldn't be able to read it, because the immersive reader is only going to read what's put into the HTML editor as content, not necessarily embedded. But that's a great question. I'm going to test that out once this is over. Yeah, perfect. No worries. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Those of you who are still here, I had a wonderful time, and I hope to see you again.